What are the best ways to use sermon bumper videos at your church? Let's get started. Hey, ministry leader, I just want to say this week, your work matters. You are grinding it out. You are working hard. Ministry is hard. It's not easy. Your work is making a difference. Don't grow weary in doing good. You might need to hear that this week. You are loved. You are cared for. Even if no one sees it, your work matters for the kingdom. Let's jump in this week and talk about sermon bumpers. What is a sermon bumper? What is the best length for a sermon bumper? Where can I find ready-made sermon bumpers? All these questions answered and more coming up. Does your church have an active social media presence? Do you find it hard to keep your pages current and engaging? Well, our friends at Outreach have a solution that can help. Outreach Social is an inexpensive service that provides you with an easy-to-use automatic post scheduler that connects directly to your social pages to keep them updated. The subscription service also has over 4,000 graphics and motions, or you can upload your own. Right now, you can try it for just $1 a month for the next 3 months. Just visit outreach.com/outreach social. That's outreach.com/outreach social. Hey guys, today I welcome Daniel Gregory. Daniel is the lead pastor at Momentum Church. He served as a student pastor. He served as a lead pastor. He's used sermon bumpers over the years in ministry in a variety of settings. Let's hear from Daniel. Hey Daniel, welcome, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Hey Carl, thanks for having me, man. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, man, me too. So, man, give me a little bit of your background. I know we were talking a little bit before we jumped on that you were at Victory Church in Texas, and then now you're at Momentum Church. Kind of tell me a little bit about that background and where God has you now.
Yeah, so I was born in LA to a church planting family. We planted a church there and then became missionaries, planted churches kind of all over the world. I grew up in Fiji most of my life, and that's really where I got to start in video. There was a vacuum for video content while we lived there. So I did a lot of music videos and things like that. And then 18 years ago, we moved to Florida and started a church called Victory Church out there with my family. And then in March of this year, we transitioned to Texas to start Momentum Church. So we're kind of neck deep in that process right now.
So how long have you been there, did you say?
In Texas since March. So just a few.
Wow, so brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So tell me how that church plant's gone and what God has been doing with you guys over the last little bit.
It's gone really surprisingly well. So we did what's called a parachute in. We didn't know anybody when we moved here. Literally just our family, no connections, moved in, and in a few months, we built a launch team of like 30 something people. But then within the past month, we actually started advertising and doing video-based ads. And the team has really just exploded since then. And now we're at about 150 total, that have signed up to be a part of our church. And a lot of that just comes from video marketing, just a very effective video marketing campaign. So
I know we'll dive into this more, but tell me about the power of video. Obviously, you guys have seen it, and video is the way that the world engages with content now. So tell me from your experience the power and the impact that video has.
Well, I mean, even just our story of church planting, we're doing exclusively video-based ads. We tried doing, some photo-based and some other things as well, and they did not get traction. The thing that has really worked for us is, and I'm a video guy, I have equipment, I've got cameras, I know what I'm doing, but using a selfie camera vertical video, that has proven to be the most effective in terms of advertising for us. And, we went from taking several months to build a launch team of 30 people to 1 month, getting to 150, from just doing vertical video ads. So I believe in video.
Yep.
Instagram, Facebook, all the social media platforms are prioritizing vertical video right now. They're all kind of built around that architecture. The algorithm's favorite. I think that like video, if you're a church and you're not doing video, you're going to really, really struggle in this era, you know?
Absolutely. So, tell me the difference, or I'm trying to get to like we need a mixture of raw video, like you were saying, selfie
Yeah,
style, and high quality, like really well produced pieces. Would
sure.
you agree with that? And kind of where's the application that you've seen for both styles?
I do agree with that. And so I default to like the highly produced stuff. So for me, it goes
Yeah, me
against my
too.
nature to do anything that
Yeah,
is
me too.
rough or unpolished.
Yeah.
But I noticed in marketing, it depends on what you're trying to do. I think if we're doing sermon series trailers, I think if we're doing testimony videos, different things like that, I think that there are places to do high quality content. But I also think at the same time, people are looking for authenticity. And if something is too polished, it
Mm-hmm.
comes across as marketing. So I think right
Mm-hmm.
now, and who knows where we'll be 10 years from now, right? Maybe it'll swing back the other way. I think there was a time when people were looking for polished, but now because people have seen so many filters, so much advertising, I think they just want to see something authentic. And I think that there's something that strikes people as authentic when they see a selfie camera or a vertical video that's shot on an iPhone. I think Ty Lopez was probably like a big proponent of that, where he'd be like standing in front of a bunch of Lamborghinis,
Yeah.
talking about how he got all these cars. And obviously, he has the ability to have a polished production, but he's doing something particular, or intentionally rather, that's low production values because it strikes people as authentic in the moment. You could have a script, but it doesn't feel scripted.
Yep.
And I think that that's what people are looking for to grab onto. And then the polished stuff, I think, comes in the context of like a church setting. I think you can do
Mm-hmm.
marketing with it, but it just depends on what you're marketing. So just knowing what video I'm making, what the intended audience is, the feeling that I want them to have when they watch this, and then tailoring your video content to match the audience and the desired outcome.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're obviously run a company that's all about high quality visuals for
Sure.
churches and ministries. So I believe in that.
Yeah.
But I agree, man. I think that from a marketing perspective, social media especially, that kind of raw, you can get away with a lot. It doesn't have to be super polished. But I
Yeah.
don't think I would translate that into your room as much,
Mhm.
unless it's a super,
No.
maybe like a testimonial from a missionary on the field or something like that. But I
Yeah.
think your bumpers, which might be a good transition here for us, I think your
Sure.
your bumpers and other content should remain polished
Right.
and high quality. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And so right now, because we don't have a church yet, we're marketing ourselves. We're marketing me and my wife. And so we need to appear accessible, authentic. And I think that doing a low production video, it's almost like an invitation into our lives. You know what I mean? But then when we get to the
Mhm.
church side and we're marketing the church, we're marketing a particular ministry, we're marketing a sermon series. Now I want to lean into the production side of things, and I want things to be polished because that is a reflection of the church itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, so I think the authenticity side leans more towards the raw, unpolished stuff.
Hmm.
But then when you get to the excellent side and you're trying to showcase the quality of what you offer at your church, I think you have to lean into that produced side as well. And so you have to know what you're doing with the content that you're producing.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's talk about sermon bumpers. I love your perspective here, because not only are you a pastor who has used bumpers and video content in the worship experience and in other places, you've also created that content. So
Yes.
the video editing in, the motion graphics in. So let's kind of start elementary here. So let's define some terms, be very basic. For those who don't know, what is a sermon bumper?
A sermon bumper is a short video clip that sets the stage for a topic or a theme in your church service. Um, it's, 30 seconds, a minute long. And when people watch it, they know what they're about to get into when the person stands up on stage to preach.
Yep. All right, so best length, I agree with you, 30 to 60 seconds. Why
Mhm.
why do you lean shorter? Do you lean longer? Why do we want to stay in that time frame?
Well, I've done probably, I counted a while back and I'm trying to remember what the number was, but I've done probably about 150, 60, somewhere there around sermon bumper videos, whether from my church, other people's churches over the years. And I've played around with lengths. I've done something as short as, I think 20 seconds was the shortest. The longest was like 3 minutes, which was way too long. And a lot of it's trial and error. I used to do commercials as well. So I understand like the value of kind of dialing something in to a very concise time frame.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the 30 to 60-second window is where you want to be. But for me, subjectively, I like to land the plane at exactly 60 seconds, as close as I can get to that. If I landed at like, 50, 55, whatever, that's fine, but I shoot for 60. My goal when I make the content is 60. I feel like when it's 30, it's really, you can do it, but it's really, really challenging to get something that's impactful, that's exciting, that sets the stage in 30 seconds. And I feel like 60 is a better window to be able to communicate what you want to communicate without going too long. I think when you go over 60, every second after that, you start losing people's attention and it starts feeling like I'm at a movie instead of watching a trailer for something. So I think 60 seconds whets the appetite. And that would be my goal with anything I produce, to land it at exactly a minute.
How much should they be text driven and how much should they be footage based? What I'm getting at is you don't want to necessarily steal the pastor's thunder and preach
Sure.
everything that he's about to preach. You kind of want to
Hmm.
prime the pump
Yeah.
and tease the content, right? So
Hmm.
kind of talk to me about how you've done that, how you kind of weigh those things.
Well, I try not to. You don't want to be wordy. I've watched some sermon series bumpers that are very wordy,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll have like an entire Bible verse up on the screen. And the reality is, people are not reading quickly these days. And a lot of times, when people see a lot of text, they just tune out.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use words, but I use words sparingly, and I use words to kind of accentuate the visuals. The visuals are much more important to me. I believe you should try and tell the story with visuals. The expression is a picture's worth 1,000 words. So why would I try and put 1,000 words on the screen if I could just tell the story with an image? And I think images evoke emotions. They produce a response in us. They
Mm-hmm.
get us invested. When I could see somebody's face, I'm going to be far more invested in the emotions that they're experiencing than a text saying that they're sad. And so I use words very, very sparingly. Obviously, the title of the message has to be in words. If there's a tagline to the series, I want to put that on there as well. Sometimes I will use words to ask questions or to get people thinking. But the purpose of the words has to be, like you said, it's priming the pump. So it has to be priming people for the content that's about to come, but not taking center stage or giving too much away. So asking a question, if you're doing a series on forgiveness, be like, do you, as an example, you'd be like, do you struggle with has someone ever hurt you? Like that question. And you cut to an image which sells the question that was just asked by the words. So just kind of playing back and forth with those things, but definitely leaning more towards visuals than text.
Okay, we hit this a little bit, but what is the purpose of a sermon bumper?
A sermon series bumper, man, it helps set up the message. I think that when it's done well, when the pastor walks up on the stage, people are ready. They're anticipating, they're excited. It's a transitional element as well. So for us, we would have worship, and then worship would end, and we needed time to get the team off, because there was one set of stairs on our stage. We needed time to get the team off and the pastor up, and the pulpit moved to the center. And so playing that bumper made a very, very clean transition. I think a lot of churches, particularly smaller churches, they get murdered in the transition time. There's just so much dead time. It's so awkward.
Yep.
And you're in there and you're just sitting there, you're waiting and you're like twiddling your thumbs, and they're like, and it almost can come across bumbling if you're not careful. Where people are moving a pulpit, people are getting off the stage, and everyone's just sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen. The bumper covers that, and it functions kind of like a shield. And all of that stuff happens behind the scenes, and people, their eyes are directed to a screen, and they're not looking at the stage. And so I think that that's a huge value for it, to be that transitional element. Um, I was saying a second ago, but like setting the atmosphere. Like it could be a thermostat for the message. A good bumper gets it to where it's just right and everyone feels good. But a bad bumper or no bumper, I think you're not setting the temperature of the room. So people are coming in, and the onus is now on the pastor to be able to transition from that moment of worship to a moment of message and teaching. And I think if you have a good bumper in there, it gets in there like a thermometer and it sets the temperature. So when the pastor steps in, everyone's ready and the room is set. I think another value of it is that it's marketing material. It becomes like a movie trailer for the series. I always thought about our bumpers as movie trailers. And when I just went on a date night with my wife last night, and we sat down in the movie theater, and there's a trailer for a movie called The Creator that's coming up. And I think that trailer is just masterfully done. And I didn't know anything about this movie 3 months ago, but now because I've seen the trailers, I'm so excited to watch it when it comes out. And so I think that a good sermon series bumper can be that as well. It's a piece of marketing material. And if you produce it well and it's high quality and it's exciting and it's interesting, that can be shared outside the walls of your church. People can be on social media and they'll share it. I remember we did a sermon series one time called Driven. And it was about what's driving you. We're all driven by something. Are you driven by good things or bad things? Are you driven by the Spirit of God? Are you driven by your flesh? That sort of thing. And so the bumper was people driving sports cars. And we got really, really cool sports cars, and we raced them for the bumper video. And then before and after the services, we did car shows. So we'd have some really, really nice cars sitting outside of our church, with the hoods popped up. And people were sharing that video like crazy. And all the car nuts in our city, like their ears perked up, and they wanted to come and see this church that had this crazy car racing video as their bumper. And people were volunteering to bring their cars to park them outside. It was like a volunteer car show. And it was kind of like a bit of viral marketing. So it was awesome. And we had a bunch of opportunities like that based off of well-produced bumper videos. The other value is like the identity of the series, is tied up. What I have found, and this is my subjective experience, I found that the identity of the series that I would preach would be tied up in the video. So when we would be talking about sermon series that were impactful to people like a year down the road, I'd be like, hey, over this past year, what was a series that really stood out to you? And they would always refer back to the video. They might not even be able to remember the message, but they remember the video because those visuals were strong in their minds. So they'd be like, oh man, it was the car driving one, or it was the one, remember the one that we did where you talked about the armor of God, and it was called Suited, and you would put on a suit every single Sunday, and the video was like that really cool neo-noir vibe, and had the music that sounded like it was from Stranger Things. They'd always go back to the video. We did one that was called Do You Lift, Bro? And it was a very comedic video. And people would always be like, man, that was my favorite. And it almost to a point where as a pastor, I was getting a little offended because I was like, can you tell me anything about the messages? Can you tell me anything else? No, just the videos. And I started getting over myself to the point where I remembered like, okay, well, like both are good, and there would be some times where people would remember specific messages, but I feel like everybody will remember the series by the video. So the identity of the series was tied up in the video. That's what I found. And part of that is because it's the packaging, right? It helps it stand on its own. I've been to a lot of churches where I've heard great messages. The pastor's killing it. The content's fantastic, but there's no identity for the series. He's like, okay, we're going, and they might even have a title for the series. They're like, we're going into a new series called, Heart and Soul. But all it is a title. And then the weight of the series and the identity of the series and all of that, it rests on the pastor's individual messages. But what if we could package that and put it in a box set, and it's not just a bunch of individual episodes, but it's actually a box set where it's like, hey, this is season 1. And I'm sitting here, and across from me is my video collection, and I've got a lot of TV shows and stuff, and I have box sets, and I'm a collector of box sets. And, if you were to ask me, about a show or about a series of movies, I'm like, oh, let me get you my Indiana Jones box set. And I pull it off the shelf and set it down. And then it contained within that box set are the individual Indiana Jones movies. And I think that the sermon series bumper and the packaging becomes that for your messages, where your messages are just individual episodes inside the greater box set of the series itself.
Awesome. There's so much there that was excellent, man. I want to dive back into the bumper being a transitional element.
Sure.
And I think that's another reason for the length. If it's 20 seconds long, that doesn't really give your team. It's a very rushed transition on stage to get
Yes.
your team off the stage.
Yeah.
And with that too, let me allow you to make this argument. Why can't I just we just pray, and
Yeah.
the prayer, during the prayer, our pastor comes on, and that's when that transition happens. We don't really use a video there. Convince me why a video would be, and you definitely did with setting the temperature, but make the argument for me. Why should I use a video there instead of a prayer or another transitional element?
I've got a couple of things off the top of my head for that. The first one being then you're reducing prayer to a transition. And I think outside of video, like that's a problem in and of itself, where you're thinking like, we're going to use prayer to hide something that we're doing. And people are aware of that. Me and my family were planting a church. And so we're kind of going around to a bunch of churches out here. And there's a church that they have a great kids program. So my kids like going to that church. And every time we go, I always laugh because they use prayer as a transition. And this is probably just me being a jerk. But like they pray to get the worship team off and get the pastor up. And every single time they do, they have somebody on stage that starts off in the middle of the stage. They give announcements and then they pray. And I don't know why, but I kept my eyes open when they prayed the first time. And the person very, very slowly, like, is praying, asks everyone to close their eyes. And then they start walking backwards slowly off the stage to like create minimal amount of movement until they get to the very, very edge of the stage. And it just looks hilarious. And so every time I go back, I have my eyes open during prayer, and I don't mean to, but it's just such an obvious transition moment. And the prayer doesn't feel sincere because this person is trying to pray long enough to get people off stage and on stage. And I think prayer needs to just be prayer, honestly. Like there's power in prayer. Like theologically, we need to have reverence around prayer. And I think that when you reduce it to a transition element, you water down the value of prayer. This is just my opinion. If you don't agree, that's fine. And I also don't think that it really sets the tone for the message when it's a transitional element. I have seen people that come up and it's an authentic prayer. That's different. But when we do the video, I'm not punting to prayer to cover something. I'm using an element that's designed to be a transition, but also designed to set expectations. And so I think that, you can use prayer. But I don't know that really has the effect of priming people for the message, especially when that prayer is intended to be a transition first and a prayer second. So I think that bumper videos are going to be much more effective at being that transition because that's inherently what they are.
So from a pastor's perspective, once you land in place and the bumper still has a few seconds left and now you roll into your thing, talk to me from that end. How has that really helped you? We talked about music. We talked about the minimal text and not preaching my sermon for me, things like that. I think music is a big deal in the temperature setting of where you're about to go as a pastor. But from a pastor's perspective, what makes a good sermon bumper? Maybe talk to the media team on this one.
Sure. I think that the perfect bumper is one that is the right length that sets the stage for the message that I'm about to preach. If I'm doing a sober subject and you have a comedic bumper, that's not going to work well. But if I'm doing a lighthearted series and you have a comedic bumper, that's going to go extremely well. We did a series one time called See People. And it was about like seeing the needs that people have and the way that people are hurting. And we did a video and we staged all of this, but we had homeless people on the street and people that were struggling with addiction in the video as a narrative. So it kind of felt like almost like documentary style, but it was all staged. And it was very emotional. And I remember the very first time I preached a message in that series and people had seen the video for the first time. When I stepped on the stage, there were people with tears in their eyes because the video was so impactful. And I got up to preach, and my first line, coming up to communicate is there are people hurting all around us, and we need to be aware of the needs. And we need to see people. That was like my opening line. But when I stood up on the stage, everybody was already there with me and I hadn't even uttered a word. And so a lot of times when you're communicating, it can feel like you're pushing a car that's run out of gas. It's in neutral and you're pushing it. I think that when you have a good bumper, I think when you have a good bumper, you're on a downward slope and the car's already rolling when you put your hands on it. I think if you have bad transition, I think if you don't have a good bumper video, I think that you're starting off at the base of the hill trying to work your way up. You can do it, but the onus is on you. It's more of a struggle. It's harder, and it's going to take a lot longer for you to build up momentum if you're starting at a disadvantage as opposed to starting with gravity on your side. So I think that the perfect bumper is that gravitational pull that starts taking people into where you want them to go. It's a primer. I think that when you get up there, I mean, if you've ever tried to paint a wall, if it's primed, it goes a lot better than if you just paint on top of what was already there. So I think that worship is a coat of paint, all of that. It's doing its work. But then you come in with that bumper video and now it's a coat of primer that's painted. And now whatever paint I put down is going to stick because it's been primed. I think it positions the speaker to be able to step right into the stage and have an expectation level of the audience that's perfectly calibrated. A lot of times when you stand up on stage to communicate, people don't know what to expect, especially if it's their first time there. They're like, is this a stuffy church? Is this guy going to preach out of the King James? Is he going to talk about the Greek? I think when you do a bumper video, people, their expectation level gets more calibrated in and they're like, oh, this is a laid back place. Oh, these guys don't take themselves too seriously. Oh, this is going to be a fun message. Oh, this is going to be a serious message. And it helps to orient people. Because I'm sure all of us have been in a situation before where, something that was unexpected happened. And part of like being a pastor is we want to kind of create, set the expectations of people. That's why we do plan your visits, right? So that when people come, they know what to expect because there's a lot of anxiety when I come to church for the first time. So anything I can do to calibrate somebody's expectation, is an advantage to me and it's a blessing to them. So also we talked a second ago about how it's marketing. I think that the effective bumper is an attractive piece of marketing. It whets people's interest in the series. And my thoughts behind that is that it should get people talking outside of the church and get people listening inside of the church. And I think if it does those things, then you've created a successful bumper.
How important is a theme or let's say a brand for your series? So you mentioned the car series that you guys did,
Mm-hmm.
Driven, where you had a car show. And then, so I'm kind of in the belief that it's an experience from before
Yes.
you enter the room to the parking lot to in the room, to the lobby. Like it's an experience all the way through and back out.
Yes.
So there's one theme that drives you, pun intended, through the whole experience. So talk to me about how is that important to you to have that? And I think your audience has told you so when they can remember Driven and they remember Suited and they remember the brands, the looks,
Yeah.
the themes of these series. But how is doing things in themes like that made an impact with your people?
I think it's super helpful because it gives people handles to grab onto things. I think a lot of times in church culture, we understand things because we're in ministry, and we're used to interacting with, different elements of church. But people that just come in that aren't in the weeds like us, we have to put handles on things. If you grab a coffee mug that doesn't have a handle is not a fun experience, especially when it's filled with hot coffee. But when you put the handle on it, I now know where I need to grab. There's no confusion. I don't need to figure out how I'm going to hold this thing. The handle makes it intuitive for me. And I think that good branding is that handle on the content that you're trying to get to somebody. You're trying to get somebody a coffee, but I need to put a handle on it so that you're able to intuitively know how to grab onto this, how to hang on to it, and how to get it where it needs to go. And so I think that you have a larger brand, which is the church and what you're doing. But then you have these micro brands, which are your sermon series. And think about it like Nike. Like Nike's a massive company, but then you've got Air Jordan in there, which is a micro brand. And that is a micro brand that gets people excited within the greater brand of Nike. So you could be a huge Nike fan, but then you've got Jordan. Now within Air Jordan, you've got some more series as well. You've got Jordan 1s, you've got Jordan 2s, you've got 6s, you've got all these, and then you've got collaborations. So it's like, do I like my Fear of Gods? Do I like my Travis Scotts? And all of these things are micro brands within the greater brand. And it helps bring a greater sense of identity. Because if I told you that I'm a Nike guy and buy me a pair of Nike shoes, you could go out and buy me the wrong pair because you got me a pair of runners or, Air Force Ones. And what I really wanted was a pair of Jordans. And so it helps for people to be able to recognize and identify the different elements that you're trying to bring as a church when you brand them well. That's why we call kids church and not regular church, this is where I take my kids. And I think that your sermon series bumpers as well are a way of like, okay, this brands this series. So if somebody is in my church and I'm preaching at some point, I'm like, hey, we talked about this in one of our previous series, called Welcome to the Wild. You guys should go check that out. That's on our YouTube page. There's a playlist for you. And then when people go to that playlist, they see the bumper video, they see the branding, and then all of those individual sermons are there. And I don't have to go back into that subject because I've already covered it 3 or 4 months ago. I can just refer them back online. And then that series becomes something that lives on forever. Kind of like, when I grew up, you would watch TV shows on TV and that was it. And if you weren't home at the right time, you missed Lois and Clark. But now everything lives on Netflix and I can go back and rewatch those episodes anytime I want. If there's a message that stood out to me, that's another thing I missed earlier. People that have messages that stand out to them are able to find them more quickly when you have proper branding and packaging on those series. So people remember they go back to the video. So like, man, what was that message in the Devoted series that really stood out to me? I remember the video and I go back and then it's all packaged well. The artwork is there and they're labeled properly and people can go back and find the episode that they want to that spoke to them. And I would find that happen all the time when people went back to our archive and watched video content. So
okay, good. How do you consider your audience when choosing or producing your sermon bumpers? So what I mean by this is how much do they need to appeal to non-churchy people? Or come across too preachy, or how much are these internal speak, things like that. How do you consider your audience?
Everyone's going to need to dial that in according to the culture and the values that they have and what their target demographic is. Our target demographic was always unchurched. And so for me, I always thought first from the element of unchurched. And I use it as primarily, I treat bumpers as a trailer first and a bumper or transitional item second. So that means primarily for me, it's a marketing asset. And so there can't be any internal dialogue. There can't be any church speak in there. We have to make sure that it's accessible, not just accessible to an outside world, but also compelling to an outside world, like a movie trailer. I mean, movie companies spend millions of dollars for trailer companies to cut trailers of their movies that are going to make people want to come and check out the movie. And a good trailer is going to heighten the interest of a movie for somebody that sees the trailer. Maybe my interest level is at, a 10, and then that trailer takes it to a 20. It's to get butts in seats. And there's a verse in the Bible, it's Luke 14:23, where it says, go out into the highways and byways and compel them to come in. For us, that's like go out into the Facebook, go out into the TikToks, go out into the Instagrams and compel them to come in. And I take that word compelling very literally. And so I think that anything that we put out there needs to have a compelling aspect to it that draws people in and makes people want more. When people watch that trailer, they need to think, this church seems like a place that I don't want to miss. I've got to go and see what they're doing. I've got to go and learn more, and it heightens their interest in it. I think that's the way that I think about it primarily is if somebody sees this, is it going to heighten their interest in this series or in our church?
Good. All right. What are there any other tips and tricks on how you've created or how you've delivered sermon bumpers in your context?
A lot of times it's how we've done. Honest, a lot of times we sit down and we workshop sermon series ideas. So we would do a creative meeting and we would plan out our series for the whole year. And when we planned out the series, we would talk about like, what is the core theme? What are the core ideas? Once we lock that in, we're like, okay, how do we market this theme effectively? And so, for example, the Driven series, for me, that came out of a desire to see people that are I would see a lot of people in our church that were driven by, sports or driven by, hobbies or what have you. And I was like, what if we had a series where we were talking about people being driven by the right things and not the wrong things? Okay, how do we market that? Well, I mean, you sit down and you start having conversation, you get some ideas going. Like, what if we treated it like a Fast and a Furious, kind of a packaging, like what if we literally took the idea of Fast and the Furious, and because at the time there was a Fast and the Furious movie that was coming out around the time that we'd be doing the series. Like, what if we positioned it around that so we can piggyback off of the interest in cars and then make a series that actually people might even confuse it for Fast and the Furious while not being not being a parody, but kind of being in that vein. And so then we sat down, we're like, okay, so then we're going to do it with cars themes. And, so we did that and we made sure that the graphics, we wanted it to look like a movie. And so all of that creative, outpouring came out of just sitting down and having a planning meeting and getting all these ideas up, saying no idea is stupid. Every idea has value. And how do we allow the marketing to be as compelling as possible? So I would say get people in the room that are creative, that can have those conversations with you, and start writing things down. We had big whiteboards and we'd write down every idea that we had. And then we have to figure out how to execute that and what that looks like. We'd come up with reference art. So there's a Dwayne Johnson movie. I think it's called Faster, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you look at the poster for that movie, and you look at the poster for Driven that we made, they're very, very, very similar. There's dark, moody clouds behind it, big, bold letters, the colors, all of that. So that became like reference. So as we were sitting in that planning meeting, I pulled that up. I was like, what if the poster looked like this? And that influenced the art style. So we weren't necessarily ripping anything off, but we were allowing things to inspire us. And that having those references gave us like a visual target to aim at as we generated all of our content.
So with the artwork and the visual content, why do your visuals matter? Why are you so gung ho about it being high quality? We kind of started at the top between talking about raw versus produced.
Sure.
In these settings where produced is how we want to deliver that. Why does that matter? Why can't we just throw anything up?
Yeah, Colossians 3:23 says, and whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for man. So I think that God is worthy of good things. God is worthy of our best. God is also a creator. The first thing we see about God in the Bible is that God created the heavens and the earth. And then when God created it, he would step back and say, it's good. So not only is God a creator, but God creates excellent things. So I think that when we operate in our creativity and we create excellent things, that we are just walking in the image of the God that we were created in. So I think that that's what the church should do. And I went on a vacation with my wife to Rome, and we walked in the Vatican and all these ancient churches, and we're looking around, and some of the most recognizable, most incredible artwork of all of human history was created from the church. The works of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, like the Sistine Chapel, probably arguably one of the most famous paintings in the world, is it's from an artist that created an image of God and man for the church. And as we walked through, I started realizing how much creativity and art came out of the ancient church, and how the modern church has handed off creativity and art to culture, and art shapes culture. And so when culture is creating art, then they're just reinforcing the values of culture. And so when we step back and say, what's happened to culture? Why is the world so crazy nowadays? There's a bunch of answers to that question, but I do believe that one of the answers to those questions is that churches handed off art to culture, and then culture has used art to shape that culture and reinforce it. What happens when the church takes art back and we begin to create compelling pieces of art that attract the world? People are attracted to excellent things, and they're attracted to beauty, which is why old churches use great architecture and painting to attract people in and to illustrate the beauty of God. We need to do that again. And we have a digital paintbrush, and a means by which to construct that art. And I think that when we do great art and it's well made, it's compelling to people, it's attractive to people, it's interesting to people, and I think it brings glory to God. And all of those things coalesce when we do it at the best of our ability to bring glory to Him.
Does that help it translate into how you share the gospel? Should we visually communicate the gospel?
100%. 100%. Jesus used parables to share the gospel, and I think that sermon bumpers can be a modern day parable. I think that if this is crazy, right? But I think if Jesus had a social media, like he would use visuals. Like this is the language of today. David used poetry. That's art. He used music. He was a worshiper. All those things. The Apostle Paul referenced poets. And all of those were the art that they had at their time. And they would use that to share the gospel, whether that's through storytelling, whether that's through poetry. And what we have right now is still storytelling. It's still poetry, but it's also video. It's vehicles that they didn't have at the time that can take the gospel message. That parable that Jesus would preach to a crowd of people gathered in front of him, we can film a video that goes all around the world and sees thousands of people reached. I've done videos that have had over 1 million views. That would not have been possible in Jesus' time. You can create a video content that has millions of views. And you have a church in Nantucket, but all of a sudden you're reaching people from different parts of the world. And I've gotten emails from people all around the world that have seen some of the content that we've produced. And it's made a difference in their lives, and it's helped articulate the gospel to them in a different way than just reading the Bible. And so I think it is totally invaluable, and every church should be leveraging it to spread the gospel.
Good. Well, man, thank you so much for your time. I feel like we can compare our movie collection.
Yes.
I have an embarrassingly large movie collection. It's all digital now.
Yeah.
Have you used Plex? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. I don't know what Plex is.
So Plex is where you digitize your movies and shows and whatever.
Okay.
And it's a library, your own personal Netflix, basically,
right.
where you kind of a digital library. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Anyway, thank you for, I really appreciate your time, man. This has been excellent. And, man, I hope, and just pray that your church, that Momentum Church goes extremely well. I know you guys are going to grow and do awesome things, for the kingdom. So, man, thank you so much, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, ministry leader, you and your team may be feeling overwhelmed with all of the visual media needs at your church. Your visuals matter, so I'd like to invite you to take a look at our ready-made media library at churchvisuals.com. It's packed with over 30,000 pieces of media for your adult, kids, or student ministries. Mini movies, series media, ministry graphics, theme packs, and more. All instant downloadable visuals ready for you to drop in this Sunday. Start downloading today at churchvisuals.com. That's churchvisuals.com.
Closing it up this week, here's your Church Visuals tip of the week. Use sermon bumpers as transitional elements in your worship experience. That's it. Thanks so much for checking us out. Churchvisuals.com is our website. We would love for you to connect with us there and on social media. If you want to reach the people you want to reach for Jesus, your visuals matter. I'll see you next week. Your Visuals Matter has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals. Executive produced by Carl Barnhill, edited by AJ Schubert, title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.